Okay, in this video we will install SQL Server 2012 for vCenter 6.x for Windows. I would say with SP1. Okay, as you know, with vCenters, with vSphere 6, vCenter appliance, which is Linux based, is also very good. It's a very good choice for a company who wants to have a solution which is ready to go. It's appliance based, no Windows license required, no SQL Server license required. However, if you still want to go for Windows Server, there could be many reasons for that. You have expertise, you already have SQL Server deployment, or you are comfortable with dealing with Windows machines and Windows environment, or let's say you have a plan to deploy Horizon View desktop virtualization and you want to install Composer on vCenter server. So uh, let's assume that you want to go for vCenter server for Windows. So the requirement for vCenter server for Windows is, firstly, you need to have a SQL server. If you already have a SQL server deployment in your network, it will be preferred that it's deployed in highly available environment. Maybe you have SQL servers always on, uh, you know, uh, uh, configuration, or maybe you have SQL Server failover cluster, or you may have SQL database mirroring. But the idea here, just make sure you have it highly available, because vCenter, it depends on its database, which is basically Microsoft SQL Server. Excuse me. So in my case, I would like to install SQL Server on the same machine where I will install vCenter. And the reason for that is uh, I like that way, to be honest, especially for small to medium sized business. It is, sorry about that, especially for small to medium sized businesses, it's easier because if you can afford have a SQL server dedicated for vCenter, you don't have to have an enterprise edition or something big. You can just have a standard edition. And the reason, if you install it on vCenter, especially if you are deploying vCenter in a virtualized environment, resources doesn't matter that much because you can always beef it up. Let's say if I install vCenter and Platform Service Controller and SQL on one machine, I can always beef up that machine. I can give it more memory. I can give it 32 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of RAM, or put it on SSD, storage tier, you know, and for small size or medium size deployment, if it has 4 CPU, I can even configure vSphere 6 fault tolerance to protect my vCenter. So if my SQL Server and vCenter running on one machine, they will all be protected altogether. And of course, if I want to back it up, I can back it up as a whole, I can restore as a whole, I can replicate that VM, for example, using some third-party solution like Veeam Backup. Um, it's always recommended though to have a separate backup of SQL database or vCenter server, but of course it's also very important to back up the VM as a whole. So there are many scenarios, and typically in an environment, and one more thing, by the way, if you are using the Linux appliance, that's also same thing, right? It's a Linux appliance with an embedded database, which is good enough for quite a large number of hosts and virtual machines. And all you have to do, just make sure it has appropriate resources to run. So this is the idea. So in my machine, in my case, I have this computer, vCenter, and it has 12 gigs of RAM and 100 gigs of disk space, 4 CPUs, and here I would like to install SQL Server. First thing first, if you are installing SQL Server 2012, you need to install .NET Framework 3.5, which I have already installed. And once you install .NET Framework 3.5, it's available. If you go to add roles and features, you can select, the features .NET Framework 3.5. It's the first one. It will ask for the path of SQL CD-ROM or DVD or source, and you can provide that. Once it's done, you can always start with SQL setup. And SQL setup is very simple. All we need is a database service and SQL agent if needed, and we are just going for standalone installation. Management Studio, of course, we need to install, and SQL Native Client. These 4 components we need. Books Online, it's your choice. And in one of my videos, I think it was like Zen Desktop series, where I installed SQL Server. You can always refer to that. In my case here, I will install SQL Server again on this machine. Most of the time I'll stick with default settings. I have SQL 2012 with SP1 here, and that's what I will install. So it's checking for files. Okay, Windows Firewall, it's okay. It's a warning because firewall is enabled. I don't want to install all features. I'll install database engine and client tools connectivity, management tools, documentation, it's your call, pens. Okay, let's select it. I will stick to default path for SQL files. And this SQL Server I will use just for vCenter. So what I would like to do, I will not run this SQL Server under Windows account, or under Windows domain account. I would like to keep it isolated. I would like to keep the default instance. So in case if there's something wrong with it, with my let's say a communication between this server and my domain controller, I don't want my SQL Server to be affected. So that's how I like it. I like the SQL Server which is used for if you are deploying separate SQL Server, especially for VMware vCenter. I like to keep it separate if it's possible, unless you have a highly available environment. Let's say you have a physical SQL cluster and you want to utilize that. and it's a part of domain, that's also fine. Absolutely, there is nothing wrong with that. But that's what I recommend, and it's a lab environment. And even though if it's not lab, uh, this is what, if you don't have a proper SQL environment, this is what I will recommend. Go for a separate SQL server. Don't depend on your Active Directory, especially for vCenter server, SQL servers. So I'll go for a system, or I can create a local account, but I'm fine with it. And I can even make this one automatic, though it's not required. Correlation is default is all fine. Authentication could be anything. I can choose mixed, though people tends to go for Windows authentication mode, more secure. But this server is not exposed to internet. It's in my data center under Titan security, so I don't mind running under mixed mode, and you can secure it with a very strong password, or even if you can go for Windows authentication mode, that's also fine. I would like to add local domain admin. Sorry, not domain admin, local administrators group. Yeah. So local administrators group will have SQL Server administrator rights. So let's say unrestricted rights to database engine. And next, and install. So while the installation is taking place, let's do something which is, though not necessary, but okay. Um, it's basically a continuation of last video where I installed ESXi. So what we can do, we can go to our domain controller. It is necessary, by the way. And what's that? Go to DNS. Okay. And I have a domain called itsense.com, but there is no reverse lookup zone for that. So I would like to create a reverse lookup zone. And network ID 192.168.0. Yep. Okay. This is one thing. And second thing, for ESXi, see, vCenter have a record because it's Windows, it automatically registers itself, it's part of domain. But ESXi, there is no host record. So I would like to create a host record for my ESXi1, and IP address is 192.168.0.241, and associated pointer record and ESXi2 will be 192.168.0.242, and ESXi3 192.168.0.243. Okay. I will mention that when it comes to installing vCenter. Maybe there are some people who might skip this video of installing SQL Server and they go for embedded Postgres. SQL installation while installing vCenter, and then they later on they think, oh, when did we create host records? If they are, especially if somebody's following along or it's new to this technology. So I think installing vCenter video, I will mention this point again, that you need to create this accounts and reverse lookup zone. Okay, let's see what's happening with our SQL server. SQL, where are you? Or vCenter? Yeah, here it is. Okay, it's still going on. So what I will do, I will pause this video and I will come back again when it's done. Alright, so the installation is completed. SQL Server installation completed successfully. Congratulations, it's with Service Pack 1. So close that. And we have installed SQL Server. While we have installed SQL Server, let's do a few things. Which is, of course, configuring. So I'll go for date installed and management studio. Okay, all right. What I would like to do, I would like to create one database here. Okay. And we see DB, let's say. vCenter database. Here, okay. Primary initial size. Initial size, you can go anywhere between 20 to as much. There is one more thing though. You can start off with 20 MB or 100 MB, and it will grow if you are using auto growth. If you have, let's say, if you are deploying this vCenter in virtualized environment, I would prefer use thick disk format. And if you can put it on SSD tier, that's better. Because auto growth, what exactly happens, it may cause fragmentation, which may impact your SQL Server performance. So what you can do, you can set the initial size quite substantial. Let's say 2048, just 2 gig. And auto grow by 1 MB, it's there, but we can change this one, and the log is, say, 10 MB. All these things can be changed, of course, and there's no hard and fast rule, but that's what I like to do it. Under options, again, log size is relevant if you are using recovery model, full recovery model, right? If you are not using full recovery model and you are going for simple model, then what exactly happens, that log file doesn't play significant role in recovering of SQL Server, right? So whatever backup you have got at the time of restore, this is what you have, because transaction log won't be played. The changes will not be saved to transaction log, because transaction log will keep truncating, and itself. It's like you don't want transaction log management. Usually, if you have a database in full recovery model, how you clear transaction logs? You clear transaction logs by taking full backup of transaction logs, right? But in this case, if you set it to simple, you don't have to worry about transaction logs growing and growing. No, it won't happen. If in case if you are interested in more details, I would recommend to check SQL Server videos. You may expect some SQL Server videos from my side on which I would love to explain this idea and would like to go down a drill of backup and restore SQL Server, which will be a good information for those of you who like to learn, and especially from those people who might come up with a scenario that your vCenter not working, something happened, and you have your SQL database backup for vCenter and you want to restore, right? Anyway, I will keep it too simple, and it's just one file group. Okay, so I would like to say okay, and this database is there. Second thing, I would like to go to the properties and my environment. You see SQL Server memory, it's too much. That's the memory which is allowed to SQL Server. I would like, for SQL Server only, I would like to allow 6 gigs of RAM, which is, sorry, my maths is not that good. So if it's 6 by 1024, 6144. Okay, currently that's the running value and this is the configured value. Okay, fine. I have 12 gigs of RAM in this system, by the way. And for security logins, we would like to create one login. Typically, I like to keep login name same as the name of the database, which is vcdb. Those of you who are coming from the background when we need to create, remember when you are deploying SRM, its requirement is the schema name has to match, the database name and the username. If you recall SRM5 installation guide for SQL preparation or something like that, right? So it came from that. So that's what I prefer. But you don't have to do that. In case if vCenter, you can have a different name. You can even use Windows authentication if you like. But this is what I like to do. And I like to specify password here. Okay, default database set to vcdb. I would like to assign sysadmin role to this user. And for vcdb, I would like to give it db owner. I think all good. Alright. Okay. So we have a user vcdb, we have a database vcdb, and what? That's it. We configured SQL memory and initial size. Good. So now what I would like to do, go to control panel, administrative tools, and ODBC data source, system DSN, add SQL Server native client. Please make sure you select SQL Server native client. Name vcdb and server. Here you can specify IP address or loopback. SQL authentication, vcdb. Remember the username we created. Now change the default database to default, which is VCDB. It's fine. So if I see this, you see, it just appears like that. Okay, default is all good, and let's test. Successful. Okay, so this is it, guys. We have installed SQL Server. We have created SQL database. Mm, we also what I'd say. Sorry, created SQL login, and we configured ODBC connection, and this is it. So now what's remaining is installing vCenter, and that's what we will do in next video. So I'll see you soon. Take it easy.